Welcome back, everyone. We're here at CPAC. We're sitting down with Burgess Owens, representative here. And, you know, I know you're speaking at CPAC, and your main topic is family. So tell us what your focus is on.
Well, first of all, Josh, it's a real pleasure to talk with you. If we really want to know what we're fighting for at this point, it's truly is family values. It's a culture that's made our country the greatest culture in the history of mankind. And I can say that from a perspective of growing up in a really remarkably successful family, successful community, and one that's just very proud of who we were. I grew up in Tallahassee, about 4 hours, a little bit northwest of here. And it was a community that, even though it was segregated, KKK, Jim Crow, that community itself had a lot of pride. They believed in meritocracy. They believed that we can gain respect, command respect of our fellow Americans by winning. And so how do we do that? Well, we have a family in which young boys and girls grow up knowing about how to respect God, country, family, respect for women, and respect for authority. That all happens with that family. Is where young men know what it looks like to protect and provide for women. To have such respect for womanhood itself that you're willing to do anything and sacrifice anything for that. And that's what we've been missing out on the last few decades, where what we're seeing happening in the black community, where young men are not understanding their responsibilities to commit to their families and be the provider, to be a partner, to be a friend, and to be a good example. Those things are missing. So we have to get that back, and once we do, then we'll be okay. By the way, we do have an enemy. The hard left hates God, hates capitalism, and hates the family unit. And that's what we see in Black Lives Matter.Inc. That's their what's the word? Their mission statement. And so if we understand that and recognize we're up against that, Democrats and independents and Republicans can come together on those things we agree on, because we have the same end game to give a positive in for our country. We have to realize there's an enemy out there that doesn't like the same things we do.
What you're talking about is a very different approach to facing racism and facing troubles, because really what you dealt with, Jim Crow and KKK actually dealing with it, is way more significant than, the systemic racist narratives people are dealing with today. That was in your face.
Yeah. But
you overcame that and you became really successful. How did this formula play into your success?
Well, part of the success is I saw it all around me. And I would ask Americans, first of all, we need to learn our history. Don't buy into the leftist mantra of systemic racism. Everybody has tough times. No one is going to be liked by everybody. The key is, what do you do to command respect for yourself, for who you believe you are, and for your family, and for your name? So I grew up at a time with a black community, even though we were segregated in Tallahassee, Florida, even though at 12 years old I was marching in front of Florida State Theater because we couldn't go into that particular theater. We turned within. We knew what it was to have a priority of faith, of education, of the family, and free market. And because of that, in 1960, the black community led our country in the growth of the middle class, men matriculated from college, men committed to marriage, percentage of entrepreneurs over 40%, which meant across our country, 50 to 60% of blacks within the segregated community were middle class. So success is what you see, is what you believe, is how you're taught. We need to get back to that. And at the end of the day, there's no excuse today when you have a black president, a black vice president, and a young man like myself who grew up in Tallahassee who's now congressman. There's no excuse for anyone not to be able to do the same thing. As long as you don't look at yourself as a victim, recognize when tough times come, man up, woman up, overcome it, get better, and then turn back around and help other people to know they can do the same thing you've done.
You said part of this, you said something interesting, focusing inside. Can you explain that?
Focusing inside, and I, again, because it's not hypothetical to me, I lived it. I know what that community looked like. We did not trust government. So what do? We trusted ourselves to come up with solutions. We had teachers who truly were all in. What's happening today, where you have teachers who will not go back to work, or leaders in a union who think more about themselves, their wealth, their abilities to have unlimited vacations, that wouldn't have happened during my time. So it was teachers, it was fathers, it was professionals that turned within, business owners that allowed our community to continue to grow and prosper. We need to do the same thing today. We need to look at ourselves as being the solution to our problems, number one. That's individually, then as a family, and then as a community. If we do that, first of all, we will learn to have a lot of pride in who we are, and we don't look to somebody else as being our problem. We look at ourselves and figure out what we need to do to overcome that. and appreciate the fact that there's no country in the history of the world that is giving more opportunities to Americans than we are today. So let's look at that. Let's not look at the negative, focus on the negative, look at the positive, and move forward and build our dreams.
Now, I know the Democrats right now are also talking a lot about fighting against racism and discrimination. They have the new Equality Act. They're talking about things like pushing back against it, what they call systemic racism. Do you feel that what they're doing is a solution to this? And what's your take on this?
Tearing people up, dividing people, having people hate each other has never been our solution. That's not the American way. I just want everybody to remember where the worst misery of black Americans are being done. It's based on policies, number one, by the Democrats. Go to Detroit, go to Chicago, Ferguson, Baltimore. You see the highest amount of black people illiterate, not coming out of school, not knowing how to read and write. The least amount of jobs for young teens, the most amount of abortions. We have over 20 million young babies. Babies have been killed since 1970s. Guess who's doing that? It's always the same party, the Democratic Party, that teaches our kids it's okay. We have 70% of black boys now, black men, who do not commit to the mother of their kids. That's a policy issue. So if I would say, if you want to look at what racism, look at the parties overseeing these areas where blacks are doing the worst. And yeah, they're being targeted, but they're being targeted by the leftists. And by the way, leftists come in all colors. Marxists, socialists come in all colors, black and white. So let's look at the policies they're putting together. Think about what's happened the last 4 years. Because of policies of President Trump, we have the lowest unemployment in the history of our country for blacks, Hispanics, Asian women, veterans, teens. We had the 400% increase of black business ownership, 400% increase within 2 years of black business ownership. That is a group that will not only invest into the community, but that will be the group that powers the next middle class. And that will be the group that looks at their kids, that want to bring their kids along to build their business also. That was happening with the last administration because of policies, and now we're going to see a total implosion of that by this present administration because of policies. So let's not buy into that. Don't allow the left to teach us and to convince us that we should become racist by looking at each other outside first. Look at inside out and find the best of each other, and we'll do much, much better.
You talk about this inside first, perspective. I'm curious. Looking back on your, childhood, growing up, do you think if at the time, blacks were taught to feel victimized, and whites were taught to feel guilty about their race, do you feel that would have changed the situation of what you saw? I
think what I look at, and again, I'm so thankful for the generation that raised me, because that generation would have found it abhorrent to be looked at as victims. They worked way too hard through meritocracy to command respect of everyone. This was the community that leaned very hard into education. If you want to know why Clarence Thomas was able to come out now and be Supreme Court Justice, why Condi Rice, these are all segregated communities. Why I went to University of Miami, got a biology degree, because we're so focused on education, and want to make sure that the kids and their generations could hold on to that name, their family name, and be proud of it. So I would say that I wish that the lessons of my parents' generation were being taught today. It's not, unfortunately, because they were going to be sure that no one ever looked down on them. Being a victim is not a place where anybody should want to be. That means that we're waiting for somebody else to take care of us, or somebody else to pay us off, or somebody else to do something that's going to make us feel better. When at the end of the day, we've had nothing but victors all the way along the line. And we've shown that throughout our history. We just need to learn that history again and be proud of our ancestors, be proud of ourselves. And if somebody tells us we can't, we double down and prove them wrong. At the bottom line, that's what we do.
Hey, Burgess Owens, thanks for being on Crossroads.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it, bud. Big time.